Good morning. This is Jarma Bennett from the State Water Resource Control Board. Thanks for joining me for the January CEDEN User Group meeting. Today, I have a couple of quick updates on some things, and then I just wanted to finish up on our active sampler data entry that we've talked about for a couple meetings now. And that's all I have this morning. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with the updates. In past meetings, I've talked about our transfer of data to from CEDEN to EPA's Water Quality Exchange. You can download Water Quality Exchange data from the National Water Quality Monitoring Portal. For a while, we were sending CEDEN data regularly. Then we had an error that prevented data from reaching it to a WQX, and then we had to, because of other data flows that the Water Board has to send to EPA, we had to update our node, which is the kind of data hub that we send data to that then gets routed to EPA. So we had to change the, update the configuration in our node so it was no longer compatible with the CEDEN data. And earlier, I think it was probably in last spring, I let you know that I was planning to use WQX Web, which is a tool that EPA provides for users to configure their data to upload it more in a manual fashion. And so I've spent time working on the WQX Web pathway, and I've gotten a portion of the data since 2019 and 2020. But then I got, so I made progress, so that's good. Some of it's made it there, and I'm continuing on that pathway to do that. Just this week, I have to ask our DIT programmer to update a query, but it is working that way. It's just going a lot slower than anticipated. So that's that update. Any questions about that? Then the next thing I wanted to mention was our advanced query tool available through our CEDEN website. Oh, Adam, did you have a question about the WQX transfer?
It was just quickly, like, thanks. It's great to hear that there's progress being made. I was curious if you, I know it's hard to put a timeline on stuff, but if you even had like a rough idea of how many more sort of hurdles are there for the rest of the data?
Yeah, what stopped me this time was that I realized that in my original query, I didn't filter out runoff records, and so they look like sample water. So Justin's on vacation this week, so he can't requery for me. So when he gets back, it can requery and then finish sending those. I understand the process now. I should have the data in the right format, so it should be going much more smoothly. I'm currently focusing on records from sample dates 2019 to the present. So, and then we'll go back and look for records more strategically, I guess, of things that were submitted since we've stopped sending data, but have an earlier sample date. So, I mean, to try to answer your question, I think I'll have the the current chunk that I'm working on, the 2019 to current data, done in probably 3 weeks after, just next week. So if that helps. You can only do 30,000 records at a time, and then that still takes hours to get any errors back, and then it's kind of like our CEDEN process. You find your errors, then you realize, oh, they don't have one of our vocabulary values, have to get those added. It's not the same process to get the vocabulary added, but it's still a process, and then you run into problems. So I think that's as much of information as I can provide at this time.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so then the advanced query tool, just a heads up that our IT division has let us know that there's work that needs to be done on the advanced query tool. The operating system needs to be upgraded, and they're concerned with some security issues, and it may not be salvageable. And so we are looking at alternatives. If you've been attending these groups for a while, you may remember that several years ago we started out thinking, we'll update the query tool first, because people wanted to have different features and things. And then that's when we said, well, wait a second, we really need a new database, and then we'll follow up with a new query tool once we have the new database. And so then we stopped that query tool update, and instead have been working for a long time on the database update. We may, at this point, from what DIT is telling me, we likely won't be able to wait until we actually transfer to CEDEN 2.0 before having to retire the AQT. I think that means that we will have at least an interim solution that we can build upon, and hopefully then transfer to uh, the new data source of CEDEN 2.0 when that's available. But it will likely, as with many things, be an iterative approach. So we'll get the basics first in some kind of tool for users to access CEDEN data, and then build onto it. So don't expect everything to be great when we first deploy something, but we'll continue to work on that. We don't have a replacement yet, but just want to give you a heads up that that's likely coming sooner than expected. Marco.
Yeah, hi, Dharma. You are kind of implied that CEDEN 2.0 would be able to report CEDEN 1.0 data. That's part of the process. I thought that they were two separate systems.
No, I didn't mean to imply that the data from CEDEN 1.0 would go into CEDEN 2.0. I hope that eventually a reporting tool would be able to report out data together, but it wouldn't be part of the CEDEN 2.0 system. It would be a third, like a Tableau product or some other product. Does that clarify it?
Yeah. And then another question. So Swamp has a online data warehouse query tool. Can you just use that and point it to the CEDEN data warehouse for making that data available to the public?
Is it an access?
No, it's an online.
Oh, it's on
web
online.
page.
Sorry, you said that.
Yeah, so you have a login and stuff, but it seems like you could take that and make a copy of it, not have it password protected, but it has the underlying queries and stuff for pulling out data by projects or stations, and you're able to report habitat, chemistry, toxicity data. It seems, in the data warehouses themselves, the underlying data warehouses for both SWAMP and CEDEN are the same, or at least they were the same. I don't know if they still are, but it seems like you should be able to take that tool and point it towards a CEDEN data warehouse to make that data available.
Yeah, I'll ask about that. I did ask about if anybody's familiar with this SWAMP data dashboard, Michelle Tang's tool, and asking about that. And she said that would take significant work and reworking of that tool to use. I didn't ask just about the what you just suggested, Marco. So I will check with I guess Melissa and Tessa about that option. I did let them, they are aware of the AQT problem. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
they
I'm
can
kind of surprised that Michelle said that, because I mean, at least when we were working it, the data warehouse process was the same for SWAMP and CEDEN, produced the same tables, the same fields and all that. So it seems like pointing it from one to the other, the underlying queries and stuff should work. You're just creating a new source, but I don't know, maybe things have gotten too far apart.
Yeah, I mean, at least for the dashboard, Michelle's data dashboard tool, it was because the amount of data in CEDEN is more than SWAMP, and so if she queries data from the open data portal, and so that relay of data from the open data portals API would be too slow to generate first. So, but I will check on the data warehouse. Thanks for that suggestion.
Okay, sure.
Tran?
Hi, yes, I was just wondering if you had an approximate timeline of when the advanced query tool will be phased out.
I don't have one at this time. They're still going to try to do the critical updates that are needed. But what my understanding is that it would still be on, even if we made updates, it would still be older technology or software versions that aren't supported, so that then if we run into problems after that they we wouldn't be able to get help with that. So we're still trying to know or understand how successful the updates will be. And so I think we're going to, do a test run of that. So we're still in progress. I don't have a timeline, sorry. Any other questions? Yeah, I just wanted to, even though I don't know that much information now, I wanted to bring it up so that it wouldn't be a surprise when it does transition. And I'm definitely committed to making the data available in as close to the existing functionality as possible. But again, some things may need to be built in over time. And we do still have data available on the CEDEN data available on the open data portal, but that tool, doesn't allow most people such as myself to easily query data. If you are versed in using APIs and things, it can be a powerful source of data, but I think for a lot of people, that's not really a user-friendly option. So like I said, I am committed to making sure that we have something. Okay, so those are our updates. And then the last couple meetings, as I mentioned, we've been talking about active data or active sampler data. And I put in some more examples, a few more as we have talked about. We didn't think that because we're still getting concentrations of analyte per sample volume of sample water, that we didn't need a separate guidance document like we do have for a passive sampler, but we wanted to provide some information. So we're adding this section for active samplers in the chemistry data template. And so last time I just had one row. I'm increasing that so it can hopefully give the idea that some of these other things are can change. So I have the existing one row that we had. And one thing that we spent some time talking about last time was the collection method code. We originally just had active sampler, and then we were just going to put the amount of time in comments, but we know that comment fields can be tricky because they're hard to populate and people don't necessarily follow the rules when we state them, and so it can be hard to then use the data on the data consumption side. So we talked about having specifying that in the collection method code, like you might see in the composite sampler. We have some of those options, and so I came up with some of those that had the actual ranges within the name. And we had said maybe we could just put active sampler 1 week or 7 days, and then in the description we could say that you use the closest and value of your duration. But I then decided that, well, you could just put that in the actual code as well. And so I had these choices: active samplers 0 to 6 days, active sampler 7 to 13 day, active sampler 14 to 20 day. And then this one is a little bit different because it seemed like the 30-day might be a popular one that people were trying to meet. And so I didn't want to have to 27 days and then have this weird gap to 30 days. And so I'm suggesting that we just go to 29 days and then have a 30-day as well as a unspecified option. And so these would be the names to go with those codes. Are there any comments on these options, and if you think they would accomplish the goal that we talked about, or whether or not you made or present for last time's discussion? You can.
This is Xian from DPR. Hi, Jama.
Hi.
So I have a suggestion. So for the lab collection comments, you put the days in there. I'm just curious that you do have other comments in addition to the comment in the active sampler, right? If it's just active sampler, and if all the entries are days, then you don't need to put days there. You can put a default unit of days for this column and just put 10. But if you have other comments that say, some other words for other entries, then that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it still could be, and it's still a comment field, so there may be other things to convey there. I don't think they're used too much, but it is, like you said, could be used for other things. And so I'd be uh, worried if we just put 10, it wouldn't, I mean, maybe it's still not clear just having it 10 days, but at least it gives you some sense that it's what it's talking about. But
Yeah, and then if this data field contains other kinds of comments, then I would recommend saying at least put like a duration, 10 days, duration of deployment, 10 days, something like that.
and you could see on this, the last one, I didn't put the, well, that was more exact. I didn't really guess mean to do that. Right. Because you do have some indication with the that it's 7 to 13 days, that it is just more precise information. So I might take that one out, and then so you'll notice that a lot of the things in 33 and 34 are the same. We did talk about, oops, I didn't make those different. These has to be different. Is that where's my, oh yeah, that there'd be a separation of the particulate from the dissolved. And so hopefully I captured that right. I realized that I didn't finish the result information. I was but and I also I was trying to find analytes that we have that I have a particular fraction. I found this one, but I don't know if these two methods were appropriate for um, active samplers. I did find on the CLAM website that they do reference the 1668C and 525.2M. So these ones I feel better about, but I wasn't sure about the 8141 AM and if this would be realistic for active samplers. But I did want to see if there were, mostly I wanted to know about the particulate and dissolved, if I captured that correctly. Anybody remembers that discussion from last time in November? I know that Dane Harden, who joined us last time, and has a lot of experience with the active samplers, was unable to make it today. And so I can send this more completed example to him and see if he has any other suggestions about methods and analytes that might be more appropriate. But this particulate and dissolved is what I was, I guess, more worried about that I captured correctly. And but I know I also didn't give you time to just review it on your own, so I can finish the result part that I don't have completed here, and then send it out and see if anybody has more thoughts on it if we don't have them on the fly here.
It looks good to me, Jarma, but I don't, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to give you something. Thankful
Yeah,
for putting
thanks.
it together. That looks good to me, but I think asking other people that are more knowledgeable would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess, Jarma, this is Marco. Does dissolved really apply? Because you're not actually analyzing the dissolved water fraction. You're only analyzing, I guess, would it be the particulate because it's what's adheres to on the media?
My
I don't know.
understanding is the particulate is the what's retained on a filter, and then what's retained on the media, that like what sorbs to the resin is dissolved. And so there's like there's a physical filter, and that I believe what was described is that the two are combined for a total, but the particulate is analyzed off of the physical filter, and then off the, I don't know if they're using, was it XAD or whatever resin, that's dissolved. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I think that's what I got as well. But I will try to confirm or see if Dane is in agreement with that. Okay, it sounds like I should finish up the gaps that I missed there and send it out, and then see if there's anything else that we think we need to add, and otherwise we'll put it and publish it on our template page. So that's all I had for today. Were there any other questions that we should cover? Okay, well, hearing none, I think we'll, oh yeah,
I was
Adam.
just, sorry, my only question was like for Marco, like basically to follow up with Marco, like does that not jive with like, does that sound wrong for dissolved? Like, does it feel weird to call that dissolved?
I don't know. I'm not really a chemist. I just wasn't quite sure because I knew like the particulate part was kind of like what remains on the filter. But to me, when I think of dissolved as a water sample, I think of just like the water itself, not so much that it's absorbed. But I don't know. It's not my background, so I was just raising the question.
Yeah, I will point to our passive discussion, and that is the fraction of dissolved with the same kind of understanding that what is retained on the sorbent is what is analyzed.
Jarma, this is Stacy. Will we need to update the definition of dissolved, or does the current definition of dissolved, does that meet that definition? The definition is portion of sample that passes through a physical membrane or filter no larger than 1 micron, or is defined by the analysis method. That's our definition of dissolved. If it meets that, otherwise we need to update it or use something different.
I mean, and I guess that would pertain to the passive, the way we use it in passive too, because I don't think it's actually, well, there we say field filtered, so maybe that one's okay. But if we're saying that that in general, like for the total, that's not being filtered, then we don't know if it can pass through that 1 micron filter or not.
Right. Yeah, it's just a question. Will it still meet that definition?
My understanding, at least in in the past, SFEI has done sampling with what you would, I guess, what we're considering active samplers, but just on a much shorter time scale. So sort of active pumping across the same kind of system, but for like 100 liters or something like that. And the filters that we were, like the filter sizes on the intake that you would analyze for particulate fraction, my understanding is they still would meet that definition of dissolved. It's just, it's the difference between, well, after it goes through the filter, are you collecting like water in a bottle, or there's this extra step of you're trying to pull everything out of that water that has been filtered onto a resin. So I think when we first talked about this, I had mentioned something like field sorbed. I thought we had some sort of sorb prep name, because I think that there probably is value in making some distinction between regular dissolved and like collected water from dissolved and a resin that's exposed to dissolved fraction water. I don't know. I don't have as much expertise as some of the people who are sort of regularly doing it.
So if we, and I remember we did look last time, and there wasn't an active prep preservation, but if we added it of field sorbed, it sounded like Adam, you thought that it did meet the definition, but it of dissolved, but because it's kind of still a different process than regular dissolved, at least by putting that prep preservation of field sorbed, it would give the user more information about how it was done, which is our goal. Yeah, I still don't see
the goal of like you're trying to analyze dissolved water. It's just, instead of doing some sort of extraction like resin or column or something in the lab, you're doing it in the field. That's my understanding of it. So that you don't have to transport like a 100-liter bulk whole water sample. Like that can be logistically very complicated, or something that's deployed for 30 days. But the goal is still to do dissolved water when you're doing it.
Lisa, did you have a question or comment?
Just that if you've got the filter and the resin are in the water and the water's passing through it, right? So then your filtering and your dissolved isn't going to be a lab filter because it's already going to be filtered out in the field. Because what's coming into the lab is going to be a solid.
Right. Okay. I knew that Dane didn't seem to think it met the definition of field filtered because it was like inside the device and it wasn't exposed to the elements, but it's still being done in the field. So maybe that's okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, should we add a prep reservation of field sorbed?
I think I'd like I threw it out there, but I'd like to hear get approval from someone who does more.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
Like,
All right.
because maybe it's implied. Maybe it's something where it's like, it's an active sampler or a passive. Like it's not something that needs additional clarification.
Okay. So I think, I mean, it almost seems, just through our discussions that that's what's happening in passive sampler by definition. And so it would always be the case. And then conversely, would there be other cases where you would use field sorb that was not either passive or active samplers, as we have been using those terms? It seems like if it's always used for passive and active and never used for anything else, and it's just part of the definition of passive and active sampler, then maybe it's not really that useful because it's, like you said, it kind of implied. See if Dane can help us with that. Or all right. Anything else that people are noticing, wanting to make sure we understand?
I have a
I
comment
was just
on.
gonna.
Go ahead.
Go. Adam, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna I think that the implication is fine, and then if we were to add anything else that we've used some other samplers that we call passive samplers, but they're physical trap samplers that trap bed sediments and stuff. And so I think as long as those get some sort of new category, such that there's no sorbing there. So as long as we don't in the future conflate two things that are also passive samplers but are this different thing, then it's fine to leave it off here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right. Lisa, was that you?
Yeah, that was me. Just on the unit name, what the laboratory is going to be receiving for these passive samplers is going to be a solid. You're not going to give us like tons and tons of water. It's going to be a solid coming in. So in order to report as per liter, we're going to need to know the volume of water. Or we'll need to report it out as, picograms per filter, picograms per resin, or picograms per kilogram type of units on the lab end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for the active sampler, we did talk about trying to convey the water volume, and decided it was not worth. And we discussed having the provider add another row of data but that row would have to go in as in the field template and not the chemistry template. So then you're starting a whole new template just to convey that, and so it wasn't worth it to put it in CEDEN, but it sounds like it still needs to get to the lab in order for you then to calculate the per
Right, yeah,
per
because we
liter.
can't convert to liters unless we know some kind of a liquid volume in there.
And so I think that would just be something that is provided to the lab, but just not, then put out in CEDEN.
Right, it could just be on the chain of custody, volume of water. We get that a lot for other things.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I'll try to fill in my gaps here and send it out what I have, and then ask specifically Dane, but if there are other people that, Adam?
I was just going to say, like, I think we decided there's not a guidance document for active samplers, but if the expectation is you have to, or the only kind of data that is desired for active samplers is on a per liter or on a concentration of a volumetric concentration basis, that is clear, so that labs aren't trying to report picograms per gram sorbent or whatever, and that's not what we want, because everyone should have volumes if it's an active sampler.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how to here, but that it seems like to avoid confusion, it should be a point of
Yeah, we can add on to this note as well, like to say report. Oh. And then in the passive sampler guidance, we say that that we're only talking about passive samplers. We could add, I think there's a footnote for that where it says active samplers will be addressed some other way, and we could just add to that note saying passive samplers or active samplers should be reported as mass per sample water volume, and therefore do not have a separate guidance or something like that. To small places, and then all of our example data. And I know that's not, since it's not all encompassing, it may not be very strong, but it does show that it's all per sample water volume. We could also just have a short blurb instead of going, just have a couple bullets in the guidance document after, and make a new section for active samplers to give the highlights that about these things. To describe that. Yeah, that's, I think, maybe what we should do. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for your input today, and we'll try to wrap up these last parts and be done with it for now. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you next month. If you have any suggestions of what you'd like to discuss, let me know. Thanks.
Thanks, Jarma.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.